can you tell me how you've dared and won?
I think it's about putting yourself outside your comfort zone, and I've done that the whole of my life pretty much. Failed all of the tests to be a pilot. Not once, but twice. I was one of the first women to fly the Tornado GR4 on the front line in the RAF. You're really close to the ground. You know, if you get it wrong, you're dying. They're trying to shoot you down, just like Top Gun. You know, that whole trying to get in your 6 o'clock position. I just thought, oh, well, I'm just so delighted to be here. I'm just so happy that there's porn on the walls. Why would you not be thrilled by that? And on the ceiling and on the floors. Be unapologetically you. You know, the world doesn't need more people to blend in. What it needs is people to radiate and to shine. And that you can only do if you are being a true version of yourself.
Hello and welcome back to the She Who Dares Wins podcast. And my guest today is Mandy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Lovely to be here.
Grand. So first question is, She Who Dares Wins. Can you tell me how you've dared and won?
Oh, how have I dared and won? I think it's about putting yourself outside your comfort zone. And I've done that the whole of my life pretty much. Not necessarily massively intentionally, but I think so for myself, I was one of the first women to fly the Tornado GR4 on the front line in the RAF. So that was a big dare, and that was fortunately a big win. So yeah, that would be the first one.
That's incredible. Just talk me through a little bit of your story from being at university, starting flying, and then getting into the RAF.
Well, as we've both just discovered, we went to Birmingham University, best university in the world.
Indeed.
And both did geography as well, which is excellent to hear. So yeah, went off to university, but it was really interesting. I'd started flying actually with the Air Cadets when I was 13, 14. I joined them on the first day they took girls, which was just brilliant. You know, you think, my goodness, how things have changed in my lifetime. And I really love flying. I then got a flying scholarship. I then paid for my additional 10 hours with my newspaper round money. So I'd been saving for a long time. Then went off to university and joined the University Air Squadron, which was an absolutely brilliant organisation that really tries to recruit those sort of undergraduates to sort of entice them into a world within the Air Force. And it really works because they sell the best of it. And I joined the UAS, that University Air Squadron, and flew loads. I got 160 hours. So that was really the stepping stone for myself for wanting to join the Air Force after that.
So at Birmingham Uni then, what was the decision when did you first decide, I want to be a fighter pilot? Because it wasn't available for you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was, so women weren't allowed to be fast jet pilots in the Air Force. The rules changed initially, allowing women to become pilots in the very late 1980s, I think it was 89. And then in 92, they started to allow women to become fast jet pilots. And I was at university then, so I was at uni 91 to 94. So I was in my second year at uni when they changed the rules, and I was like, right, I'm applying. And I did apply, and then I failed all of the tests to be a pilot. Not once, but twice. And you're only allowed to do them twice, so that was a little bit of a bugger.
But you didn't, the test wasn't set up for women. That was a big part of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that was only uncovered after I went through, realistically. So when I went through, it was just assumed that there would be, you know, no difference. And I think what it did was it really highlighted the difference in the female brain and the male brain in many ways. Because when you looked at the distribution curve for the amount of men that were passing these aptitude tests, it was a classic like the inverted bell curve. Mm-hmm. So not many fail, not many pass at a really high level, and the majority are in the middle somewhere. The distribution curve for women that were taking this test were completely different. So the majority failed. In fact, about 70% of the women taking these tests were failing them. About 70% of men were passing them. Yeah. But the ones that passed were passing at a really, really high level, like much higher than the guys. And so it's this strange, you know, phenomenon that they discovered. And it was only really because of the fact that I failed all those tests. And there was this boss of my University Air Squadron that just couldn't understand why I'd failed the test when I was flying really, really well in the air. And he said, well, hold on a minute, you're one of our best pilots. This doesn't make sense. So he looked at it in reverse and didn't say, you failed the test and therefore you're no good. He said, you failed the test and therefore the tests probably are no good. And I loved that. Yeah. You know, I mean, you must have had people throughout your career that have sort of gone the extra mile for you, believed in you, and you thought, well, I wouldn't have probably thought that myself. Yeah, it's the one thing that I actually wanted to come on to through your story, reading about these kind of male allies. It's something I chat about all the time. Yeah. I had one particular story where I was on a job and the guys were like, you are so good at your job. And I didn't have the confidence to kind of speak up for myself. And they actually got me a pay rise and a car. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, and it's the one thing that I speak to lots of women about. I'm like, when you go into a male-dominated industry, there are so many cool male allies. Yes, there is this dark side.
Yeah.
But that guy, if he hadn't have done that...
I know, absolutely.
What would have
But
happened?
I think that male allyship is phenomenal. But allyship generally, so it doesn't have to be male or female, but it just so happens that you and I have been in male-dominated environments, and so it's always going to be the males that are the ones that are going to be your allies, isn't it? And so, yeah, he probably had no need to do that, but it was the injustice of it. He said, this just doesn't make sense to me. And then he sort of got external examiners in to make sure we had sort of absolute evidence, factual evidence to say external examiners from the Central Flying School come and fly with me. They all graded me as the top mark. So now you've got this computer saying she's no good and then humans saying she is actually. And with all of that together, well, then they offered me a commission to become an air traffic controller. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. But under his advice again, he said, Mandy, foot in the door.
Yeah.
Once you're in, you can fight it from inside out. And that was really, really good advice because, and in fact, that's probably one of the best pieces of advice you can give to anyone, isn't it? Is that you don't necessarily, it's not always going to be this straightforward pathway, isn't it? But once you're into a system, my goodness, you can fight it from within. But if you don't even take that opportunity and you just say, well, I didn't get that.
Yeah.
You're almost like taking umbrage and becoming like a bit of a martyr to the system. And therefore you take a different track. And the amount of people I've spoken to who come up to me after a speech and they say to me, oh, I failed the first round of aptitude tests and that was it. I never went back. It was almost like they took that failure really to heart and then said, I'm not going to try again.
That's the one thing with your stories throughout the whole book is that really resonated with me is fail.
Yeah.
Fail because...
Fail fast, yeah.
Yeah, and then move on, but don't take the failure. And I think so many people give up. I'm a great lover of grit.
Yeah.
And your story basically shows how that is amazing and can work for you.
I completely agree, actually. But what's interesting, actually, because I was listening to the How to Fail audiobook by Elizabeth Day the other day. And she was talking about failing her driving tests in one of the earlier chapters. And I thought, yeah, you know what? That was the first thing that I'd ever failed, really, at the age of 17.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite a good effort, isn't it, to have got to 17 and not ever failed anything, because I did work hard at school. I passed all my exams. I was a sort of like, I wouldn't say a girly swot or anything like that, but I conformed to education and I sat in it really well. You know, I was happy at school, was quite popular. I've had one brilliant mate, because in those days that's all you needed. You didn't need to be in these massive gangs, did you? And her and I just spent every living hour together. And it was just interesting that, you know, when I failed this driving test, oh my gosh, it was literally, I remember having a proper toddler tantrum, lying on the floor of my lounge and literally screaming at the top of my voice. Fortunately, there was no one in. And I thought, I've got to get this out of my system, because I was like, the injustice of it. I was a good driver. And I think it was that whole thing of, it doesn't matter how much work you put in. It's not always going to be a successful outcome just on your work. Yes, you can create the right environment for it, but there will be external factors. And I can't even remember what I failed on, something insidious as far as I'm concerned. But I just was so furious that I'd failed something, but it was a really good lesson. And I learned that early, because you, of course, are not going to say, well, I've failed my driving test, I will never drive again, because it's a skill set we require. Mm-hmm. And so I always say that, you know, resilience and that grit and all of those words are tied into purpose. So if you've got a really clearly defined purpose as to where you're going and you know you want to get there, well, then when you fail at things, it's so much easier to be resilient because you want it. Whereas if you're not bothered about it and you think, well, actually, I never really wanted to drive anyway, and then you fail your test, you probably won't do it again.
Yeah.
But it's that sense of purpose that drives you and therefore allows you to gain those resilience skills.
Yeah, and it's the confidence to keep going.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful story in your book about when you failed a test, and I guess the thoughts were intrusive of, you know, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it's the wonderful story where the guys take you out on the bike.
Yeah, it was.
Can you tell us about that? Because I love it. It is Hollywood movie.
It is a Hollywood
story.
movie, actually. And in fact, I have been contacted by lots of like TV people who I think have read that story and gone, oh my God, I can just see this working, you know, on Hollywood. So yeah, no, I was literally about to fail this thing they call battle turns, and you're putting all of your skills together. Everything that you learned come down to this one moment, this one trip. And it's basically when two airplanes are heading off at really, really low level. So you're travelling at speeds of 420 to 500 miles an hour, dependent on whether you're on a target run, at heights of around 250 feet, so a pylon, to anyone that's listening.
Wow.
And so you're really close to the ground. You know, if you get it wrong, you're dying.
Yeah.
You know, it really is as close cut as that. And I have lost numerous friends actually who have flown into the ground, who got disorientated in poor weather. So, you know, all of these things are very, very real. But you're going off as a pair of aeroplanes and you're hitting targets within 5 seconds. And there was no real technology in this aircraft at this stage. So there's no head-up display. There's nothing like, you know, you see in Top Gun these days of like head-up displays with all your moving maps. There was nothing. It's basically a paper map, a stopwatch and a compass. And we're like going, and it was an absolute brain fart. You know, talk about overload. This is as overloaded as I think I've ever been in the flying world. You've also got an enemy airborne, our instructors. They're trying to shoot you down as well. So just like Top Gun, you know, that whole trying to get in your 6 o'clock position.
Right.
And you have got a blind spot. You can't see behind you. So if you are an individual, you're almost guaranteed to fail up there because you can't see your 6. But if you've got the wingman, and that's why you fly in this battle formation, so that you've got the pair of aircraft flying along together. But it means you must coordinate your turns. Because if you just go, I'm going left, dunk, and you both turn left, you're now behind each other. You're in the 6 o'clock position. So you're vulnerable, you're exposed, and you would be shot down. So as you're coming up to a turn, what you're actually going to do is you're going to have worked out how many degrees you need to turn through to assist your wingman. So if you're turning to the right, for example, through 60 degrees, both aeroplanes pull up, you will then cross at a perpendicular angle of exactly 90 degrees. And then when you roll out, geometry dictates you are now abeam each other.
Right.
It was completely brain scrambling. I mean, so if you think you've got to go, okay, I'm on this heading, I need to add this amount of degrees, but I'm going through that beyond it, and then I'm coming back. Anyway, I couldn't work it out in the air. I was just completely overloaded. And so I was really stressed, kept on failing the flight, failing again, and then I'm put up for a chop ride. If I fail it the next time, I'm leaving the Air Force. And so the guys on my course saw what was happening. They'd all finished the course by now. They'd all been celebrating quite heavily in the bar.
Oh no, so you've got that in your
the
mindset.
pressure as well, because they're going through with me, but now because I'm failing, they've all passed and they're all finished just waiting for their wings parade, and I'm going the only one that hasn't passed. You know, the stress is enormous, and I'm sitting in my room with a cardboard cockpit. There's a knock on my door. It's one of my course mates' puppy. And he said, Mans, we're going to take you out this evening. I was like, absolutely not. You know, I've got my chop ride. He goes, yeah, but your cardboard cockpit's not been working so well. Just trust me. And I thought, okay. So he took me to the bike sheds, trust waned. We got on our bikes and we cycled to the other side of the airfield. And basically there's a big parade square. And there were the remaining members of my course. And for the next few hours, these guys were just now cycle in battle formation, yelling 30 starboard, 60 port, rotate. And we did everything that I couldn't grasp in the air because I was being so consumed by the numbers. Whereas on bikes, we didn't have numbers. It was just done purely on a situational awareness, on a picture. And it was just like, oh my God, this is so easy. Like, why have I been consuming myself with the wrong thing? And it was just such a great lesson in surrounding yourself with the right people. Because actually, when I did the trip the next day and I passed it, it went well. And my instructor just said, oh my God, that was just like flying with a different pilot, because you've got a different mindset. Because I think I became confident the night before because I thought, oh my God, I can do this. So when he then gave me my briefing, I wasn't going in going, I'm going to fail. I was going in, I've got this.
Yeah.
And he said, that confidence was just like coming out from you. And then you flew the trip, brilliant flight. And I said, well, the guys did this. And he said, well, that is incredible, because at this point, you know, 6 of them had passed the course and there were 6 spaces on the fast jet courses, which were starting in a couple of months' time. Now I was number 7. The next course might be another year before that person gets through. And so one of them has probably jeopardised their own career advancement by maybe up to a year.
Wow.
To get me through. So, you know, when you talk about what makes good teams, I mean, I don't think I've ever felt so humbled at that point.
Yeah.
To be part of this incredible team with this camaraderie, with selflessness, but also with a bit of cognitive diversity in there. And it just showed me as well that when we fill our teams with exactly the same people who are all thinking in the same way, well, then we're all going to get the same results. But we focus, don't we, a lot on culture and gender.
Yeah.
But not as much as I think we should on cognitive diversity. And it's become one of my massive, big points when I'm talking to businesses, is around don't create the echo chamber. Don't just recruit the same people, same way of thinking. because you'll get the same results.
Yeah.
You need different people. And you must have seen that, because when you were working in your industry, you'll have thought about things in really different ways.
Yeah, actually, it's something I'm really passionate about, and it's great to talk to you about, is reading through the book, you know, the classic things that I can relate to, the porn on the walls, you know, being asked to be more feminine, all these things that I came across. And I do say to people, and when I've done public speaking, is there's a 10% of working with guys that is really dark and needs to change, and the culture's terrible. Yeah. But then there's like, I had 17 years of pure joy working with the most amazing characters, because when it works so well. And I think it's just changing mindsets, isn't it? And also changing your mindset. Like, I could have been a victim, as could have you, every time you turned up. How important do you think that is? And do you think that you went through, I think I was quite naive at the start of my career.
I was just very naive. Yeah,
just like, well, this is it.
I just thought, oh, well, I'm just so delighted to be here. I'm just so happy that there's porn on the walls. Why would you not be thrilled by that? And on the ceiling and on the floor, sort of thing, you know? Yeah. No, I was completely with you. Firstly, very naive, but also I was delighted to be there. Yeah. Because they had only just changed the rules. And so I did feel we were bucking against the system, the way it had always been. Now, and I think you really rightly say that, 10%, you know, is the bit of a pain in the arse part of it. Yeah. But culture has changed massively. And I always say you cannot put the lens of today on what happened for me 30 years ago and for myself 20 years ago, because it's so easy to, for anyone looking at the scenario or maybe reading my book going, that is appalling, that is shocking. It didn't feel shocking and appalling. We weren't victims. We simply went, okay, I don't like there being a screensaver of a naked woman, so I'm going to make them naked men. And then the next day they're all landscapes, because the blokes go, what? That's disgusting. I was going, rest my case, you know, and they're like, oh my God, quickly change it. So stuff like that was really, it was quite funny, you know, just find the humour in stuff. The bits I didn't like, and one bit I didn't put in my book actually, was we used to go on detachment actually. We went on a detachment to Canada, to Goose Bay. Because we could get operational low flying done out there, because it's so deserted, it's like a wilderness. So if you go to the right areas, which we're in Labrador, so it's basically forestry everywhere and lakes, but very few inhabitants. So we can then drop down to 100 feet to really train. So that really is like your Top Gun Maverick, where they're coming in that valley very, very low. Yeah. And you're coming in beneath any radars. And that's why you need to train, because it is the most intense flying you will ever do. And when we were out there, we would deploy it there for 2 weeks at a time as a squadron. And they instantly said to me, Mandy, you're the porn rep. And I said, what? I mean, the only woman on the squadron, you know, the 40 men, you're the porn rep. And I was like, what does that entail? And they went, going to the porn shop and getting porn videos out for us all to watch of an evening. I was like, no, really? And they said, yes. So I went on the first night and I walked into this little old man who was behind this counter, and I said, what's the filthiest, most repulsive, literally makes you gag porn that you've got? And he looked at me thinking, I wanted to watch this. And you could see him like raising an eyebrow. And I went, I don't want to watch it. I want to shock the men. And he went, you're with the RAF detachment? And I was like, yes. And he said, I've got just the thing for you. Let's just say, it was dark. Right. Dark, disgusting.
They were mortified, or were they just...
They were gagging.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I put it on, left the room, and they said, yeah, you're dismissed. You're never doing that job again. And I was like, good. That is how repulsive it is. But do you know what I would say, though, is unless people point it out, I mean, culture had to change. Yeah. But also it had to change for the many men there as well, because there were quite a lot of men there that were just morphing their behaviours, who were really uncomfortable with it as well. But they just get into this mindset of, I've got to conform, I've got to do what everyone else is doing. And if people tell us we've got to watch porn of an evening, there's nothing dodgy about that at all. What, 20 blokes going away to Canada and they all sit in a darkened room watching porn together? Really? I'll say nothing. But do you know what I mean? It was quite strange that this was an accepted norm. And they did carry on doing it. I got, you know, When Harry Met Sally out next time. And I was like, can we get a chick flick? And they're like, quite a few of the guys going, yes, brilliant. We love that Mandy's here. And they would get a chick flick, a killing film, and then a porn. And then I'd just go to bed. But things had to change, and they did change for the better. And actually, we saw the culture massively changing over the time that I was on that squadron. Right. You know, really for the better. Yeah. And I noticed the way that conversations changed, and it stopped being quite so testosterone-y and so alpha male. And just having more honest conversations. It sort of morphed from being just politics and sport in my first tour in Iraq to actually people talking quite honestly about their feelings and a bit more emotions the second time, and then people just being more honest about who they were as well.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. A big thing for me was, yes, the culture was a little bit toxic with male bravado in construction, but actually it has one of the highest suicide rates.
I know, it's awful, isn't it?
It's crazy. And what I would
still
see...
does.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, and I can see why. Like, as a very egotistical, like, bullying goes on all the time, and actually on site a lot of the times when there was fist fights, I felt like I'm not the worst person here in terms of I'm not experiencing the worst, but it also made me laugh in that there would be guys that were like the biggest, the burliest, and they would say what they would say, and they'd then be on the phone to their wife, so they'd be going, yeah, I'll give her one, and I'd be like, yeah, well, like, how would your daughter feel? She's the same age as me.
Yeah.
And then they'd go into the corner and be like, hi, love. Yeah, I'll be home soon. Love you. Bye. Yeah. And it's just like, why do you have... let's break this down, because then you're not going to feel terrible at the end of the day because you've exhausted yourself with this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not obviously the same as the military, but, you know, it is a dangerous working environment.
But it is so similar, isn't it?
Do you think?
Yeah, I do, because safety is critical.
Right.
It's a high-risk environment. If they make mistakes, people can die.
Yeah.
You know, and it really is that case as well. So, and this very male bravado. But one thing I'd love to talk about there is that bystander side of things. You know, have you had it where people have called out behaviours on your behalf?
Yes, and that is so powerful.
It is.
I've always, the same as you, I fought everything with humour.
Yeah.
So if I'd walk into the canteen, and if I knew that person was the one that was going to attack me, I can fish them out dead quick.
Yeah.
And I'd go for them and make a joke about them, and then be like, and it was always, for me, it was get in with the funny side, break down, you know, make them feel at comfort with me, and then we can have it out if we need to have it out at some point, just based on me being a female. But yeah, I did have quite a few occasions. One occasion where I was working with, I didn't know at the time, but like a Bulgarian mafia, and they were really protective of me, which was lovely. But I was on site in a very small office, and this guy kept telling me about his wife and problems he was having, and I was naive. I was like 21, 22, and one day he came into the office and he shut the door behind me, and it was only then. So I've been really lucky in construction. I've had like the few occasions where I thought, oh, how's this going to go down? And my body just reacted in a way, and before I could say anything, the door flung open. This 6-foot Bulgarian would dragged him out. And he was like, you never go in the office on your own with Michelle. And I was on a site with no other females. There was nothing for miles. And to this day, I think there's a lot of men that helped me in my career. But at that point I was like,
because you were scared as well, actually. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? And you're thinking, actually, I've not got a hope here.
This is serious. I wouldn't have had.
Physicality-wise, you know. And this is where it's, I mean, that is the extreme level. I mean, the experience I had was much sort of milder, really, which was, you know, guys just calling out poor behaviours, as in, there was this guy, Tristan, we all called him TriStar Pilot because his name was Tristan Philpott, and it just looked like TriStar Pilot. And he kept saying, will you stop calling me that, because they'll think I want to fly TriStars and I don't want to be a fast jet pilot. And it was just this whole thing. But Tristan, honestly, I remember this, him and this guy, Rob, they pulled it out and they said, Mandy, do you mind if we have a word with the instructors? Because we are sick to death of hearing every single instructor just bantering you.
Right.
And it was, I will say this really honestly, there was no malicious intent.
No.
It was just banter. It was just flippant comments of, I would pull up a jet, you know, park up, come inside, and they go, well, we can tell which jet Mandy's parked. It's the one that's not straight. You know what I mean? It was just humour.
Yeah.
It was. But if you have 20 instructors saying the one comment, which is hilariously funny, every single day, it becomes tedious. And it's not upsetting, it's just boring.
Yeah.
And that's what they didn't like. It was them that noticed it. I think I was so thick-skinned about it by now. And I genuinely mean that, because it wasn't hurtful. I wasn't, you know, it didn't bother me at all. It bothered them. And they went to the boss and said, could you just have a word with the instructors and get them to stop it with Mandy? Because it's just a bit tedious. And all the instructors went, I'm so sorry, Mans. And I was like, honestly, you haven't upset me, but actually it was just a bit boring. And they go, yeah, okay, appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
And I think it is really important that it was them that called it out, though, not me.
Yeah.
And that's what we sort of say. It's one of my big things as well, you know, when I talk about bystanders, you know, it doesn't have to be anything to do with gender. It could be anything about you know, when someone is on the receiving end of banter that's gone too far and you can see people are being upset, don't be the person that just stands there and thinks, well, at least it's not me that's getting the brunt of it.
Yeah, because you never know what that person's got. I think the big one for me in construction was, you know, people could be shouting. I got caught in the middle of a fist fight once. And
physically?
Well, so I was in a small office and the door flung open and this guy was pinned up next to me.
God.
And then the police arrived and they were like, do you want to give a statement? I was like, I'd be giving a statement against my boss. And they were like, yeah, but he's physically harmed someone. And I was like, yeah. So then I phoned the director of the company and I was like, what do you want me to do? And he was like, don't give a statement, I will sort it. And what he meant by I will sort it is, we'll let this go. And then I had to work with that guy. And I ended up saying to him, my morals kicked in. And I was like, you've got to stick to your morals. And I ended up saying to him, I am actually going to give a statement. Well, so I was telling him and he was like...
Please don't pin me up. Please don't pin me up. I'm like...
Yeah, but he was like, no, fair play. He said, I shouldn't have done it. Yeah. I'm really sorry. And it's getting caught into between. But and for me to stand up, I was... At that time, actually, nobody knew I was 36 weeks pregnant and I covered it with my high vis and I moved into project management. I knew nothing about management. Yeah. And this happened and I was just like, I think that was the day that I ended up crying in the Portaloo and I was like, oh, this 10 years, I've never been broken, but this has broken me. Yeah. But I think it's really important that you stand up. I feel like the military, a lot of people I've met in military are very good at that.
We have got better. I'm not good at handling conflict, and I know that. It sounds ironic, seeing as I'm in a war zone, but a personal conflict.
Right.
So my first time in the Gulf, I was bullied, and by this one guy, and he was a really big character on the squadron. You know, quite loud. He was one of those people that, when he walked into a room, if he was in a good mood, everyone was in a good mood. Right. When he was in a bad mood, it completely killed the mood. And you know, and he was also, although the same rank as me, he was sort of like a third tourist, but he was holding a position of authority within the squadron. And he decided to make my life really unpleasant out in the Gulf for the first time. So much so, after 4 months, I said to I wrote these like the bluey letters that we would write home, those airmail letters. For anyone that's listening, that's what happened before emails and texts. Okay, so we had no mobile phones. We weren't allowed them.
Right.
And it was sort of before that era when they really were as, you know, prolific as they are now. And I basically wrote this bluey home to my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. I just said, I'm quitting. This is not the Air Force I joined. My life's literally miserable. Honestly, I hate it. I hate going into work. And considering I was the only woman out in Kuwait, living in these porta cabins, in porta cabins which were basically, you're living, breathing, sleeping in the same space as everyone else. You have a single room, but obviously combined shower, combined toilets, combined with the 40 of us that were in the block. When I went out there, I was given the wall-to-wall pornography room. The room next to me had none. It's done as a joke.
Yeah, to initiate you.
To initiate you. But every time I went out there, I got that room. And I would just strip it all down. I just went with it, took it and put it outside and yelled, "Pawns up, boys," and they'd all come and get it and distribute it around. But, you know, that was pretty intense to not only be isolated for your gender out there, but then to be bullied. You know, in a briefing, every question directed at you. Every time I walked outside, they'd all go from sitting there chatting to silence because Mandy's walked out. And it was just horrible. I hated it. And when I got home, my husband said, "Mandy, I'm not going to let one man take you down. You have worked so hard for this."
Yeah.
And he ended up doing quite a lot of role playing, not in a dodgy way, though was in the Navy, lovely uniform. But, you know, practicing difficult conversations, because actually he's really good at that whole human factors and how to be assertive but not aggressive. And he's like the polar opposite of me, introvert, extrovert. It's like the yin and yang have come together, like you were saying with your husband as well, you know, calm, you know. And it's just very interesting. And so we practice all these role-playing conversations, difficult conversations, so that when the opportunity came up for me to face this guy and talk to him, I did. And my God, it went to script. Wow. I couldn't believe how powerful it was, having practiced something, because when I was talking to him, I was not emotional.
Yeah, that's so important.
And I think this is one of the things that, you know, women are being quite generalistic here, but we are generally more emotional than men.
Yeah.
You know, it's in our makeup. And so when I'm angry, I cry. And that is the problem, because then people see that you're crying as a weakness.
Yeah.
But it's not, that is just my emotional outpouring. And my younger son has it as well. When he's really angry, he cries. He's 6'7" and is literally 110 kilos. He's massive. I mean, I was just looking at him the other day and I was like, I can't even get both my hands around your arms now. And yet he cries and everyone goes, what? That doesn't make sense. But that's because he's got the same thing as me, where we get this real anger or emotion and it comes out as tears. Whereas my other son just would never cry, and my husband never cries. So it's really interesting how we portray our emotions and how therefore that is seen as a weakness. But what I loved was, because I'd practiced, when that conversation came out, I did not feel emotional about it at all. It was literally just like reciting a script. And he said, oh my God. And so did his wife, actually, who was next to him.
Oh, yes, you had the wife there.
Yes, who said, you did what to Mandy? And I was like, yeah, have a lovely chat about that over the weekend. And then he came back in on the Monday and just called me into his office and said, Mandy, everything that you did, I did exactly as you said. And I'm so sorry. Gave me some justification for it, which was fair enough. And actually, because we'd opened up that dialogue, it changed our entire working relationship. But I have learnt that since he has gone on to bully, not other women necessarily, but other men as well.
So it's something
intrinsic, a sort of sadness within him, I think.
Do you think, I've said this, quite a few girls that have come to me working in construction, they've said, can I have some advice? Have you found throughout your career there's certain characters where you need to say to yourself, and it's only, I guess, with experience, you can't change people, people, you have to just let that go?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it was really interesting, we have this annual Tornado aircrew reunion. And it was fascinating because I walked into this bar. I mean, there's about 400 men, and me. Happy days. But I walked in and I instantly clocked this one guy. I thought, I could feel my heart go. Not because there's a massive issue there anymore, and we're very civil to each other. And I ended up chatting to one of my friends on the squadron who said, oh my God, he's doing it again, Mandy. We have seen a real downturn in his behaviours. And I was like, a leopard doesn't change his spots that easily. And so... Does
it slightly make you feel a little bit better in that it wasn't just
yes,
you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think this guy has quite a lot of issues himself. Yeah. So, but you're right. But as you were saying, it's that very small percentage. That was the only time, really, that I can put my hat on and say, the only time in 17 years that I actually experienced bullying.
Yeah. Do you think that working with men, I always say it's a bit of a superpower. If you've gone through it and actually there's not many women with you, I felt like I learned so much in my job from men. There's a great bit in your book where you talks about them asking you or telling you off for pulling your skirt up, which reminds me actually of being in when I was at school, we had to have them below the knee.
Oh yeah, and you roll them up at the waist.
Stood at the bush shelter with this big thing around.
I remember it. And then this weird thing we used to do with our socks, pulled them up and then scrunched them down a bit. I mean, what is going on there? How was that a fashion? You're younger than me, though.
Not very much. There's a bit where you go in, you get called into the office.
Oh, I remember well.
Yeah, and that's great because you could have gone either way there. So if you tell that story for us, but that's
so basically, when you wear the number 5 uniform, it's this very long, straight. I mean, it's a huge improvement. We used to wear this thing called the blue tube, which was hideous, and then they redesigned it. So at least we've got this little waistcoat, which was like the men's one, and then this very long, straight skirt. But I couldn't take a full pace in it. It was so tight that I was like tiny steps walking along. So once I got onto a dance floor at about 11 o'clock at night, I love dancing. I couldn't dance because I couldn't actually move. So I just used to roll it up a bit. We're not talking extreme. I'm not showing my knickers. It's about, mid-calf.
Oh, God.
And of course, everyone was swearing, everyone's had a few to drink and everyone's swearing a bit. And basically, I had a great night. So did everyone. Monday morning, Mandy, could you go into the boss's office and take your hat? What? And I walked in, hat on, and it's going to be a bollocking when you've got a hat
a sign.
On. Okay. That's a sign. If you have to wear your hat, it's a formal, and you have to salute when you go in. It's not just can you just come in? I just need to speak to you. It's bring your hat. Okay. I thought, what have I done? I thought, okay, I know I was a bit drunk, but my goodness, can I remember the whole night? I was, yeah, I can actually. Anyway, hat goes on, salute. He said, right, no sit down, Mandy. It's just like stand up. I thought, and he goes, would you like to tell me what happened on Friday night? And I thought, well, we had a brilliant night. I said, it was really good fun, sir. And he said, what happened on the dance floor? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, I believe you rolled your skirt up. And I said, well, yeah, I couldn't dance properly. I said, ultimately it was only the officers and my course in the bar. I said, yeah, I rolled my skirt up. And he goes, and I believe that you might have swore a few times. I said, as did every other man that was in the bar with me. And he goes, well, what would you like to do about it as a consequence? And I went, Nothing. And he said, well, so-and-so has volunteered to do orderly officer for 2 weeks. And I said, well, good for him, sir. Are you going to give me that as an order? Because I'm not volunteering for that. And he looked at me and went, oh, just get out, because he didn't know what to do, because he realised the injustice of it.
Right.
And he was actually a really lovely guy. And he just was like, this is so awkward. I'm being told by someone senior that I've got to do this. But ultimately, he could see the ridiculousness of the whole situation. I mean, my goodness.
How old were you when that happened?
It must have been about 24, 23,
Nice.
24.
So a couple of years in,
Yes,
you're kind of figuring out now how things work.
Yeah, and also I'm not going to be a victim in that one.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think many of I think a lot of people didn't quite know what to do with me because, you know, everyone sort of says when you're going through training, be the grey man. Well, that's never going to work. I'm 6 foot tall. I've got a horrific laugh. And I'm a woman. I'm not a man. And I'm not grey. And I'm quite loud, you know, and I was quite loud. And so I'm aware that as an officer, it's not good to be a loud personality. But, you know, I did try to morph my behaviours constantly. And I think any of us do that into any situation because that's the way we are as human beings, isn't it? We like to be slightly a chameleon. I noticed it just last year we went to Everest Base Camp and I was with my husband and there were 6 guys from Wigan on our expedition. And so it's myself, my husband, another couple, single woman, and then these 6 guys from Wigan. And instantly, I'm from Manchester originally. And, you know, normally I've completely lost my sort of northern accent now, purely because I left when I was 18 and have just travelled all over the UK living, and I now live down in Winchester. I've even started saying Bath, which, oh my gosh, I could shoot myself for. Even my sister goes, do you really say Bath? And I was like, yeah, and it sounds natural. My God. Anyway, bring back the Bath days. But my point was, as soon as we sat down at the table, I went into straight into northern speaking, and I went, yeah, pint of beer, please. And my husband went, who's this? Like, who is this? And he said, like, you literally morphed within seconds to fit in to this sort of circumstance. And I thought, God, I did. It was really interesting because that is how quickly I used to do it in the Air Force all the time. And I think you must have done that.
It was one of my key questions to get to you was, because it was something I only realised later on in my career when I think my husband said to me one day, he was like, can you just leave your balls at the door today? Because a bit of a bravado.
Oh my God, yeah, I love that.
Because I did.
It's fun to say it to you.
Yeah. And I had a journalist phone me and she was like, writing this article, can you tell me, like, did you change your identity? And I was like, no. And then I looked back and I was like, oh my God, I did. And it's only recently that I've been reading quite a bit from Robert Greene, who talks about it's okay to have an identity at work because you don't act the same as you do at home.
Yeah.
But actually, I was like, it's really sad. Like I didn't ever wear makeup on site. I never really made an effort to just feel myself.
Yeah.
And there was one question that I really wanted to ask you was, do you think that you kind of lost your identity a little bit through your 20s in the training and getting to where you got? And do you think that's okay because that is what was needed?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, really, isn't it? I definitely morphed my behaviours. They just crept and crept and crept and crept and crept until I remember at one point we went on a detachment to America and you wear civilian clothing to travel. And I looked down at all the guys, it's like a uniform, travelling, chinos, deck shoes and a blue striped shirt or check shirt of some degree and then a blazer. And I was wearing exactly the same thing. I was like, oh my God, I've become a bloke. I have become one of them. And it was just really interesting. Now, I was, you know, a lot of people say, but you were really boysy, Mandy. But that was because I had become, I love that, leave your balls at the door. Because actually, I think that's exactly how I had just done it. And there was this really lovely story, and it's in my book, and I talk about it every time I do a speech. I was flying with a French navigator called Michel Dupont. He was a lovely, very good-looking Frenchman. I know, looked just like George Clooney. And anyway, I let my mind wander. And basically, we were going out, he was my nav out there, and we were going out for dinner, 200 other men, and Michelle and I, but it's how you frame it. I arrived 5 minutes late into the hotel foyer and all the guys from my, squadron are waiting for me. And they all look up and I was wearing a dress and heels and makeup. And I was like, oh yeah, dressed to impress. We were going out in Las Vegas. Really.
It's got to be done.
You had to be done. So I walk in and basically Michelle said, my eyes met his and he said, oh Mandy, you're looking beautiful this evening. At which point this guy Richard hit him across the head and said, you can't actually say that to Mandy. She's one of the boys. And Michelle turned back and he went, oh, you Brits, you have so much to learn about women. And I loved it. And everyone was roaring with laughter and there was a lot of backslapping. But actually, it was really funny because it turned into a very pivotal moment for myself when I look back, because I don't think I'd realised how far I had moved across from Mandy to being a man. Lovely, I might use that again. But ultimately, I'd lost my own identity.
Yeah.
And I was morphing and I was constantly trying to fit in. And there is a gulf between fitting in and belonging.
Yeah.
And I think that gulf takes a long time to navigate. And it took me about a year where actually I could start to really bring my true self to work, where I could be really honest about my conversations. And then that's when I started to do that, that's when I saw people changing in how they were speaking to me as well. And also how the other guys would be as well. And they could be more honest about, they didn't want to be these alpha types.
Yeah.
They wanted to be who they were. And I was actually speaking, I was very honoured to receive a fellowship at the University of Winchester, and I gave a talk, and one of my key messages was, be unapologetically you.
Yeah.
Because, the world doesn't need more people to blend in. What it needs is people to radiate and to shine. And that you can only do if you are being a true version of yourself.
Yeah. And through your 20s, you're still trying to figure out who it is that you are.
Yeah.
And your environment does shape you. But I think it is really important because you do get to I think I was probably mid-30s and I was like, I had morphed into this. My girlfriends were like, Shell, like, your stories are great, but like, it's not normal for someone to poo in your lunchbox at work. And for me, I was like, oh, is it not?
Is it not? because your norm had completely shifted.
So far.
And that is the problem, isn't it? And I was talking actually to an incredible woman, Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, who grew up on the streets, or she had a period living homeless, and she's now a chief fire officer. And she's written quite a few books, but I absolutely love this woman. But she said, going through her time in the fire service, she'd go to put a boot on and someone had urinated in it.
Oh, God.
And it's like she's going out to a shout and she's got a wet boot, which is stinky of urine.
Yeah.
And this was like standard, like someone pooing in your lunchbox.
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it is not acceptable. I'm going to say this right now. This is not acceptable. Anyone thinking of doing this at home, do not do this. But ultimately, it's like how that slipping of that line of what is acceptable versus what is not acceptable, it merges, doesn't it? It completely and utterly shifts.
Yeah.
And so what we are now thinking is normal behaviours is not normal behaviours.
Yeah.
Like when I go back now and I think, my goodness, no female toilets, no female flight, no PPE for females.
Yeah.
No, there was just nothing that was, they made this change to the law to say women can fly on the front line, but they hadn't actually thought about any of the processes, the policies or anything that sat behind it.
Yeah.
And that was, but we were thrilled because we were going, great, we can do it. We can be the vanguard of change.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that was quite a tough ladder to actually climb up.
Yeah.
At times.
Well, you're the first, like you and the women that followed you. Somebody has to, I always say this to some of the young girls, I'm like, unfortunately, if you're the only one in your company, somebody has to be the first and take that as a bit of power. And move forward with that. You have got to, unfortunately, set the way for the rest coming through, which is what you did. Before we lock up, sitting in that seat when you passed all your qualifications and you are in that jet, what went through your head?
I finally bloody done it. I mean,
Going to say what went through your head. Was it your first flight where you smacked your head?
I walked out to the jet on the very first flight. I'm going to fly the Tornado, and it's a huge beast. So compared to the Hawk, which is the aircraft you've been flying up to then, that's like the little mini sports car, and this is now going out to a Formula One. It's like the beast. And you've got a big ladder that goes up. But what I discovered is that the tail fin, so you've got the massive fin, and then you have the horizontal stabiliser at the back. It was exactly lined up with my eye line. As I walked out, nothing was moving, and therefore I walked out and I just walked straight into it. And I nearly knocked myself out cold. And basically I ended up with this straight bruise that went the entire way across my helmet, like across my forehead. And in fact, I went to see a Tornado recently and I nearly did the same thing again, actually. And I was in this hangar and someone who's read my book went, Mandy, watch the horizontal stand. I was like, and how embarrassing that I would have done that for the second time. There's a good job, there's a learning curve there. But no, going back to the feeling. So you've been in the training system for 4 years at this point and you're fine. You've been in the simulator, you've done 10 hours in the sim. You're now about to get into that Tornado. And the fact that this is the first time you have had burners as well, and you're at the end of the runway, my God, you light the burners and you can feel this thing. It's like you're holding it on the brakes, you take the brakes off and it just goes, whoosh. It's the best description is like being on a roller coaster like Stealth or something like that at Thorpe Park, where it's got, an acceleration of sort of like 2-3 G of lateral acceleration. That's what it's like taking off in a Tornado. It is phenomenal. And the grin that is strapped to your face. I was like, is this a fast jet thing or is this going to be permanent? It was just incredible. And for myself, that low-level flying environment of going off, flying a trip, through the valleys of the Lake District, Wales, into Scotland. I mean, Scotland is the most beautiful country to fly around, down the lochs, and you're just looking up and you've got hill walkers and you're giving them a wave. And, it's just phenomenal. It really is. And you're travelling at sort of 450 miles an hour. I mean, incredible.
I can't imagine. There's kind of, I'll say recently, last year I got my pilot license.
Oh, did you?
Wait, not for a plane.
Oh, right. Okay. What for?
Commercially to fly drones. Because
I
did land surveying. So I went and did.
For that.
And the training was with 2 RAF guys. They've got a great company. And we got all the maps out. And they were like, you should be good at this because you did geography. And like the whole... Yeah, it was like, what?
Yeah.
But I then, for my own flying that I still sometimes do, it's a course that's navigated. It's fine. But I tried FPV.
Right, what's that?
So you wear the goggles, so you are technically on the
drone.
The drone. Oh my gosh,
brilliant.
I was like, I had to go with it, and he was like, "Do you think you're Maverick?" And I was like, "So this is the only experience I have that can relate to yours." But I was buzzing of this little tiny thing, and I can only imagine that multiplied by gazillion.
I mean, the thrust is amazing. It is. It's an incredible thing to do. I mean, I'm so honoured that I've had the opportunity to do that. And it's exciting And what's really nice now is so many young people have read my book, and there was a real sort of shift from top down from the former chief of the air staff, guy Sir Mike Wigston, and he was on the squadron with me, and actually he ended up being the head of the Air Force and looked at how many women had gone through the system, and he was shocked by how few had gone through, and he said, right, we're going to do something about this. And he did a bit of a huge shift in who he pulled up through the holding packages to get them through. And one of the courses contacted me and said, hi, man, it was on Instagram. Hi, Mandy, we're on a course. There's 10 of us on the course. It was a guy called Tom. And he said, we just wondered if you got any top tips for us, because we've just all been chatting in the bar about how we've all read your book. And I was like, just out of interest, how many girls are on that? Versus, he said 8 women and 2 men. I was like, yes!
Your job is done.
That was just brilliant. And it was this feeling of like almost like Wiggy working from top down, me coming in with this book and going from bottom up, and then being contacted and so many young people reading this book and going, oh my God, I can do that. That is so exciting. Why had I sort of not thought of that as a career? Because it's a bloody brilliant career. It's exciting. It's demanding. It's challenging. There's risk involved. I love all those things. It's regardless of gender.
Yeah.
Why should gender have anything to do with it? It shouldn't. And so actually it's about recognising that's that whole equity piece, you know, rather than equality. It's equity. It's just ensuring that everyone has the ability to do it.
Well, listen, you've inspired me actually since the day I saw the clip of the Unilad clip where you talk about that experience on the jet. My brother sent it to me and he was like, in the future for the podcast, this, and I've been watching it since. I think that must be like 7 years old or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I did it on just as we're coming out of lockdown. Actually, not that long ago. Well, it must have been 3 years ago.
Right, and he that was his original. He was like, podcast with women like this. Yeah, and here we are. So I cannot thank you enough. Honestly, this has been incredible personally for me. I didn't care about the audience. No, just kidding. Sorry. So thank you for doing what you do, and you embody everything She Who Dares Wins, and I appreciate you today. And everyone, please go and read the book because there's so much we haven't discussed. I need hours with you, but it's in the book and is so inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.